Over the last year and a half, we've been building a tool that's it's a visual funnel builder for page routing, ROAS reporting, EPC reporting, so on, so on, so on. But basically, it just gives us full deep funnel analytics for any style of page from any platform. So it's really helped us accelerate the CRO guys here, their learnings with products, but also just scaling. It's taken a lot of the unknown and really provided us visibility through a funnel, through a Shopify store, through some other cart. It doesn't matter, but we just get detailed analytics at every step of the journey.
Hello and welcome to All Killer No Filler. We're here with Pilothouse, and today we're talking about something near and dear to our heart, and that's how to scale brands through structured testing and CRO. Now, we've tapped a couple of our residential full stack buyers and CRO pros, Jacob Geary and Taylor Cain, as well as CRO OG Kyle Hitchcox. Welcome to All Killer No Filler. How you doing, guys?
Good. Thanks, Eric. How are you?
I'm hanging in there today. How about you, Taylor?
Doing well. I've had 3 cups of tea and I'm ready to go.
You're on the tea. We were talking about coffee earlier. I'm on my third. I'm on a mochaccino right now, so that's my homemade skills. Nice. So let's start with Jacob. There was a recent situation where you started with a client and were able to step back. Tell us a little bit about this new situation.
Yeah, so the client brought us on, and their issue was kind of that they were just stuck with where they were. The product they had in their mind, they were already sort of hitting all the subsets of audiences they could already hit and doing all they can. So they brought us on with that in mind to go out, take a step back, maybe find value out of their product that they actually haven't found yet, and then testing these different angles out, using multiple channels and essentially, just bringing in a new subset of audience, as well as, increasing their ROAS, reducing CPA. And so far it's going really well. In terms of like the process for that, I think we're probably going to get into that a bit, but
exactly.
That's kind of the top level outlook.
Nice. So let's talk about that process. When that client filters down to you, what's your mindset? Like what are the first actions you sort of take in order to refresh things?
So we'll do our research in terms of like what they've ran, kind of, in our mind, getting a control to compare, our future campaigns to what's worked for them and what hasn't worked. And then, like I said earlier, that like taking a step back, saying, okay, well, with our other clients, things like this do work, and this product aligns with that, and we'll build new pages, build new ads, build new messaging, work with the client on that, make sure it aligns with their brand guidelines and everything. But sometimes it takes the client, to step out of their comfort zone a bit, and that's part of the process. But most of the time they'll find they're for the better, especially bringing in these new audiences organically, that they may have not hit with their existing strategies.
Jacob, can you talk a little bit like the specifics? So like a client comes to us, like what do they come to us with? What is it that we're striving to do on our end?
Like typically our main goal is to get in there, run a bunch of quick and dirty tests in terms of just like, pumping out some assets, pumping out some new pages that they don't have the resources to do, especially for their goals in terms of scale and whatnot. Often it'll be that same product guy running their ads or whatever, and they come to us just wanting us to more or less take that over and expand on it. So it's at the start, it's really just evaluating what they've ran and then figuring out where we fit in and how we can boost things.
So when it comes to that step back and that moment where you take a breath and you're like, okay, here are the angles they've been using. Here's how they've worked. Like, what is your actual creative process? Is it a team process? Do you get on a Slack call with a bunch of team members and kind of riff on ideas? Or is it literally just sort of like a creative period that you just take some time and think about, write down? Like, what is that angle, like searching phase like?
Yeah, so we'll get the team together. We'll have our initial like onboarding call where we'll start to brainstorm these angles. The messaging and the creatives will need to get in the queue. And then on the Facebook side, primarily we'll build these campaigns out as dynamic ad campaigns for each angle. Keep it all separate, the whole funnel separate for each angle. Potentially different audiences, sometimes the same audiences. Set those up as a split test, and at the start it's really just seeing what sticks. In terms of KPIs, it might be purchases right off the bat. It might be just finding those cheaper clicks, depending on what their issues were before. But we start typically with those dynamic ad campaigns, very broad angle focus, contrast testing these angles, and then essentially we'll take those, turn them into more scalable campaigns with static, fixed ads that are made up of the winners from that.
I mean, I obviously love this process. We talk about it all the time on the show here, but like, what does like a 1 month, 2 month, and a 3 month program look for a business that has a single product, a single Shopify store? What's that like 1, 2, and 3 month timeline usually? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, month one, we'll typically call like phase one. That's kind of taking what they've ran, expanding on it, and basically what we just chatted about is pretty much phase one, month one. Month two is when we really start to like dig deeper into those campaigns that are working, and we really start to pump out these new pages, iterating on what's working. And when I say like a new page, it might just be a slight headline tweak. It might just be a couple different images that our heat map data is telling us to test. Same with the ad side on Facebook, on Google, on YouTube. And yeah, phase two is when we kind of really dig into those winning angles and start, pumping out a lot of assets. And then ideally month three, phase three is kind of when we're scaling and they start to see that return really, really happen.
And what does that look like from there's like the standard product focus, standard Shopify experience that many of us are used to. We put 1, 2, say 3 months in, we're ready to scale. We've proven out these angles. At what point, or like, what's your experience? And maybe both you guys, Taylor, you could jump in here too, but is there a tipping point where you find like at what month the performance generally is better on new tested angles versus just the stuff that kind of came to us from the client?
Yeah, I mean, on my end, like it's sometimes right out the gate. It kind of depends how I guess deep the client was diving before, but typically their control is the control for a reason. Those campaigns were their winners for a reason, using their strategies they took or whatever. But yeah, I mean, we found like within that first month, we see those glimmers of pockets that are performing better than their controls. It's really about, the key is like expanding those and scaling on them, which often can be the bigger challenge. But yeah, it kind of differs, I guess, case by case.
That's actually a good segue. Like Taylor, you've done a lot of this. Like when you get into testing, so we're testing different angles, but like what kind of stuff are you using? Like once you're iterating in on an angle, like let's say you did your dynamic creative test, you ran 5 different angles, you decided on kind of which pages and content to build. Like at what point there? So kind of like stage 2, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so stage 2 for me is typically an approach of kind of diving into those angles and understanding what variables within that we want to test. And that's kind of where the topic of contrast testing comes into place. So we look at details like if there's a particular angle that's showing promise out of one of the pockets that Jacob say tested or mentioned in his testing, is there a certain page design that might perform better? Looking at some pages that might be more like image focused, some that might be more of a long style blog type copy approach. And that plays into a lot of the metrics we're seeing in Facebook, and we know about the brand already too. Understanding kind of how all of that would best fit into the customer journey we're seeing as it relates to sales and those purchase goals.
Interesting.
Very cool.
So phase 1 is this basic control testing where you're sort of control testing their existing efforts versus these dynamic campaigns. And then structurally into phase 2, how do we start thinking about actually talk about the technical, Taylor, if you can, the sort of technical structure of what contrast testing looks like in phase 2?
Yeah, so in phase 2, I'll often work closely with our in-house creative team as well as our as well as our copy team, and we'll start looking at different variables based on what we've seen work on Facebook to date from that pocket testing in phase 1. So we'll start digging in and we'll create a coordinated test where we're looking for things that are different between each page, but relate to some of those indicators we're seeing in Facebook, whether it be a certain like color palette, or whether it be certain styles of copy and things like that that we can test and expand on the page side and blend that together. So we'll often look at that and we'll structure it out, and we'll get all the technical side of things set up with some of the tools we use that help us really have that full access to the data. And then we'll essentially work on structuring the tests so that we've got different paths that we can test and grab data from, and kind of blend that into a narrower path as we go and as we learn more about the results we're seeing.
And you're making sure that the audience, the source of traffic, is the same essentially for all these tests, which is, I think, a little bit where this internal tool we use comes in, which allows us to take individual campaigns and then switch variables throughout the process. Can you talk a little bit about first of all, Kyle, first introduce Rubix. We're like, it's a...
Ooh, we're doing this, hey?
Yeah, do it.
Yeah. Over the last year and a half, we've been building a tool that's it's a visual funnel builder for page routing, ROAS reporting, EPC reporting, so on. But basically it just gives us full deep funnel analytics for any style of page from any platform. So it's really helped us accelerate the CRO guys here, their learnings with products, but also just scaling. It's taken a lot of the unknown and really provided us visibility through a funnel, through a Shopify store, through some other cart, it doesn't matter, but we just get detailed analytics at every step of the journey, which I've really enjoyed working on for sure.
Does it even out? Because my understanding also is that it allows you to just keep campaigns steady with one, because anytime you change major variables like a link within a campaign, you're going to lose momentum, you're going to lose UGC. Rubik's, part of the beauty of it, in my understanding, is that it allows you to just keep those campaigns going and then test things beyond that without disrupting the campaigns.
Yeah, totally. You can have your source, it'll track UTM variables, it'll display all those things where you're not actually changing your links. So you always have a waterfall of traffic that you can measure against, and then, easily dupe out funnels, clone things, whatnot, apply those to new campaigns. Your retargeting will be different than your prospecting. You might run 5 different prospecting angles, and you can see it all visually. It's super cool. I have a lot of fun with it.
That's awesome. If you want to learn more about Rubix, we're in sort of just above stealth mode with that, obviously, because we're talking about it, but feel free to send us a message. We're all, I think it's an interesting opportunity to, test something interesting in the space. I'm excited for what it'll be.
That is, let's just leave it there. If people reach out, we'll see what happens.
Nice. But so back to testing a little bit. How many angles are you testing in one of these contrast tests? How many sort of significant, so go to pages, I guess. How many pages will you be testing at any given time for a single offer?
Yeah, so for a single offer, it depends on kind of a lot of factors around that brand specifically. So we'll approach each brand differently, but with a similar formula in terms of how we want to look, so that we can do it, so that we can scale going out of that test and gain those key learnings and find some winners as our main goal. So I've done contrast tests sometimes where there are big gaps between each page style, and we're doing like 3 pages to start. And then from there, we gain a lot of key learnings and narrow it down. And then from there, we're looking at we might even be looking as granular as details like, is having a button near the top of the presale where someone's clicking through at that step too early and they're not learning enough about the product or the brand, and we need to have like a button that pulls them down the page and then clicks them through the next. That might be a variable we get to in like the following phases. And I've worked with clients too where we're looking at a lot of different variables we've calculated out. Say we've set 5 variables and we're going to rotate different combinations, and we create 10 to 20 pages out of that test, and we turn it around fast and then get it going. And it just depends on a lot of factors like budget and things like that too.
Yeah, like some of our clients we've like tested up in like the hundreds of pages, and I think the key to that really is having the right tools. And kind of coming back to what we just talked about, it really streamlines the whole process for sure.
And also partners too, like partners that are flexible, partners that are hungry, like partners that want it at all costs. Because there's some technical requirements. It's a process, and there needs to be some trust there on both sides for sure.
And structure. I think so many people have this idea of like, okay, I'll test variables, and they have, they'll just, have no real methodology for doing it. So I think just having a structure that you can stand by is so key for getting to the right answers.
Yep.
It's cool to
Yep.
see that our team evolving in that way. Yeah. Nice. Well, what else? What else can we chat about in the CRO world? Like, what are some of the nitty gritty like details that we're actually like looking at? Into like, what are some of the lowest level details we'll be looking at in a CRO test, Taylor?
Ooh, that's a great question. So for us, like it can be as Jacob mentioned, a headline is an example. We will see massive EPC differences sometimes between just split testing headlines between two presales. We're looking, so often I'm working to combine data with like heat mapping tools and customer journey like analysis tools that give more look into an individual user's like experience with the page and a group of users experience with the page. So we'll often be digging in there and looking at, how much time are they spending on the page? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing for this brand and offer? And how do those play out with the data points we're seeing as far as CPA, ROAS, EPC, all of those things? So we'll be looking into, like often, we'll find a section on the page where people may end up scrolling through that faster, and we realize, oh, that's a key selling point on the page, and it didn't catch their eye the way it should have. So we'll go back and do a split test there in terms of some design changes to it and things like that. So we get really granular and we look at those, and often we gather huge learnings about angles too from that analysis, combined with the data points we're seeing across the entire journey from Facebook through to the end there.
Just to kind of support you on that, Taylor, like I know you guys have heard it. I'm sure all of you have heard this from me, but there's like, okay, get your click-through rates higher, your costs are lower, your cost per acquisition is great. But if you can take like a landing page click-through rate from 10% to 20%, where there's still intent, you literally just doubled your conversion rate. And so it's about these micro changes along the whole funnel, because it compounds. So like if you can take your click cost from $2 to $1, assuming it's the right audience, again, you doubled your conversion rate. You do that with your landing page, you double your conversion rate. You do that on your cart page, you double your conversion rate. You do that on your one-click upsells, you double your conversion rate. And so exponentially is really like this like start of the experience to the end of the experience, all the way beyond the thank you page, past the post-click upsells into their email. Like you need to be like squeezing this rag until it's dry and it's not sunny out. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how we've been able to just like, smash stuff like straight up. So
yeah,
it's not just about the front end work, and brands need to get their heads around that, because a lot of people come to us with stores that are janky, slow load times, broken shit, 1,000 apps. It's like, okay, let's just reset here. Like this, like this thing is just like, you've over tested to the point of it making no sense anymore.
Yeah.
Let's break it and rebuild it.
And so many brands that aren't testing pre-sale content, that are really just driving to that page, and it's working for a lot of people. And then a lot of people really stand by that. I think I remember, I know, Kyle, you've been doing pre-sale pages for, almost a decade now, but I remember, I think I was there when it really clicked for you. And that was in Phuket, Thailand, at a villa with Muhammad Ali Agel, and just grilling him. I remember he spoke for like 3 hours straight, and you probably asked, I would say you and Jeff asked about 90% of the questions to keep him going, just to keep talking about that idea of raising AOV, being and using all this content in order to do it sort of ruthlessly. I can see how much it's impacted the business. Oh,
for sure, man. That event changed everything. Like Pilothouse came out of that event. Like we didn't plan that then, but like, again, that event was amazing. You broke us down and we rebuilt.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That was Facebook Elite Retreat, and stand by for an upcoming announcement about a Pilothouse retreat. That's really stealth mode, but at some point we're going to do a retreat, and it's going to be awesome, because that was the highlight of my, career so far in some ways, was that week in Phuket, like with all these marketing masters, just throwing down on all sorts. I think there's just the impact you can have on people's businesses in those settings. As a side note, is just unreal. So so we'll have to get Taylor and Jacob out to one as well. I'm sure they wouldn't balk at being in an infinity pool.
I'd love to go back to Thailand. I was there non-business related, but that would be amazing.
I wanted to just back to a nerdy question here. Talk about statistical significance a little bit. Like when you run these tests, how, you know, everyone wants to know how much do I have to spend to know before something is a winner or not. I know there's no clear answer on that, but how do you guys think about statistical significance when you're running these tests?
Yeah, on my end, I mean, a lot of it is driven by the LTV of the customer and that initial price point. In terms of what metrics you're going to be wanting to pay attention to the most, you know, higher value products. Often you're just looking for those click throughs at the start there, and then you're starting to dial in bottom of funnel. But yeah, in terms of like how granular you get and like how long it takes to get that feedback, again, with the right tools and the right scale, it might be 2 days, it might be 3 days. If you're running $100 a day across like 4 different angles, you know, it might be like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So I think it's that price point, how much, you know, feedback you're getting back, and then budget, you know, how invested the client is, kind of going back to what Kyle said there.
Also like choosing metrics that make sense for that budget. Like yeah. Taylor, Jacob, like how would you guys, what would you look at? What would a workload be for, let's say, $500 a week client versus a $10,000 a week client? Like how do those workflows differ? And don't go super deep, but just like how do they differ in terms of team inputs? And then in addition to that, what metrics do you look at between the two to make those decisions?
Yeah, I think you can get similar feedback, but scale is going to really determine the timeline. So you can get that feedback back in a day if you have a $10,000 budget scale and you're getting thousands of clicks. You might get that same feedback from $50 a day or $100 a day, but again, you're going to need to take a week or two, even longer, just for it to be relevant. You know, you can't base a split test off 10 clicks. So yeah, the budget definitely determines like workflow and time investment, you know, day by day, I think.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and just to add some context to how I would approach that difference is it would really start at the questions I'm looking to gain answers for. So when it comes down to it, if someone's spending $500 in a week, I might look at, okay, what are the biggest drivers here to really take this to the return on ad spend goal that we want? And then look to create a structure, a contrast test around that. And take that time, as Jacob mentioned, necessary to look at how do we grow that in the increments that make sense for the brand. And I would take a similar approach to one spending $10,000 a day. I might just structure that contrast test differently based on those circumstances, knowing that smaller details there too could make such a huge difference at that level of scale as well.
So what are the details, Taylor? Like what exactly are you looking at on a smaller budget versus a bigger budget?
That's a great question. So on a smaller budget, I'm going to be paying a lot of close attention to, like, as you mentioned, click-through rate combined with conversion rate and EPC in particular. So the EPC metric's amazing because it's super easy to compare that with your link click cost. So when we're looking at that, we can create that gap and understand where that is. So within that, I'll be asking kind of a bigger, and again, it kind of depends on what phase we're at and where the brand's at. But say we're at like phase 2, where we have some initial learnings, I would be looking at our historic data to see where the biggest areas of either improvement or areas of strength are, and kind of how do we build that around that in a way that makes sense based on the budget, because we wouldn't want to go too broad too fast with testing, but we want to go for those high impact drivers. So that may be like a headline, that might be a page style, that might be an element on the page, a design, a graphic. It might be the checkout page. It might be that our conversion rate's quite good through pre-sell to checkout, but our upsell take's not where we want it yet, and that could be a big driver for success. So it kind of depends on where that variable is, but I would be looking at what the key driver is there, and then building around that in a way that makes sense based on budget. And with the bigger budget approach too, it might be more granular in terms of some of those details, and there may be more pages that we test within that, but it would be a similar approach.
Yeah, I remember this. This was one example on a larger budget. I think you guys made 30 pages over 2 weeks, those pages purely were different influencer pictures, different structure, different color palette, like Taylor was saying, different randomized button text. Yes, I want this, save whatever. And I think that actually you found, like, I think just doing that, like basically 30 of the same pages, just visually different with some minor tweaks in structure and call to actions. Like what was your lift on that? Hopefully it was better than hopefully it's good.
So with that, it was really interesting. We learned about which combination, because it was a combination contrast test essentially, and we learned about a few like top performing combinations came out of that we were really excited by. Our lift was about a 3 to 4 times increase in EPC out of that test alone. So
wow.
Thing is, like, out of each variation, you're getting, you know, a minor increase, and you're, like you said, it compounds. You're like, oh, like, you know, maybe that test wasn't worth it. A lot of people are going to think that way. Like, we only got a 0.5% click-through increase, but when you look back at page 1 versus page 30, like, that gap is huge. And yeah, $3 EPC, like Taylor just said, that's massive.
Man, we need to do a follow along on that one day.
Yeah. Because I can mention, like, I can say too that we're still building off of that test today. Well, we've seen that growth over time that I mentioned. So it's really exciting. Like we're still using that as a foundation too for testing going forward based on the foundation we built with that.
Crazy.
My question is, when you do these, so you take the learnings from that client, that account, that test, and then the next time you go to structure a page that's similar, how much learning accrues? Or do you really take things, you know, from fresh each time?
It's a great question. So it really depends on where we're at, like, because it comes down to, like, the way I see it is we kind of have variation or iteration testing and then contrast testing. So depending on kind of where we're at, what we've been testing, what we've been doing, where the strengths and where the potential challenges lie, that'll kind of dictate how we approach it, because there's danger in going too granular. But we also want to make sure we're looking at all the details that we need to look at if there's something there that might be outlying that we can do a variable test on and see how it performs. So like coming out of a test like that where we've seen that lift over time, we're using like a lot of that content as a foundation based on the continued performance and details like that. And then looking at, like, how do we take it to that next level from where we're at currently, even though we already saw a significant increase. So it really depends on that, but a lot of it's making sure that we're working with the team, collaborating from the Facebook side as well as the page side, looking at getting all of our heads together behind it and taking a look at everything and making sure we're structuring it in a way that's going to dictate that success we want.
Nice. Now, the last thing on this topic for me is actually how we manage this level of iteration on a project level. Like, you know, the one thing I've talked about since joining with Pilothouse is just the Slack activity, just the amount of communication that's happening with this team. But if you guys could talk a little bit about what, you know, how you actually manage this much activity from a project management perspective.
Yeah. So a lot of that, I mean, reporting to clients and whatnot, we have our templated reports we obviously use. And like you said, in Slack, we'll kind of relay these quick tests we're running informally to the clients just to keep them updated. And then typically we'll summarize each test we've done after, you know, a week or two, make sure they're in the loop there in terms of, okay, like, this is our winner here. Here's the next steps we're going to take.
And in our system, how close are you guys communicating directly with the clients, or is creative also involved in those frontline communications and being sort of performance driven in the same way that you guys are?
Yeah, typically we'll have kind of the head of the buyers communicating with the client. We'll definitely have creative involved as well. And then depending on, you know, that relationship and who else gets involved, we typically will introduce some more like capacity and moving forward. But yeah, we definitely like to have each wing involved in that chatter, and that's part of our success, I think, is that back both ways.
Eric, it's a really good point too. Like, it's actually, so there's like creative, like, you know, video assets and banners and things like that, visual stuff. But then we also have like landing page group, and we have content like on page group. So there's people dedicated to those separately. So it really is kind of there's a lot of moving pieces, but it's a good workflow, and everyone kind of, you know, has their marching orders and is super stoked.
Nice.
I hope.
I think so. I think it's
Tell
a
me
pretty
if you're
stoked
not.
team. I think we still need a summer. Like we'll need to figure out. Yeah, we need to get once we all get in a room together, and I think that's like, and then we can go home and still keep working from home. But once we can all get in like a room together, I think we're going to see things even hit that next level because it's just such a fun group. Now, Jacob, you said something in the very beginning that I wanted to hit on kind of at the end here that I thought was a really interesting point because people usually think of direct marketers and performance marketers as people that can kind of come in and hit the gas and scale things up. But you sort of alluded to something of sort of the benefit, like the organic benefit of this kind of direct marketing is that sometimes you can actually like unveil whole new audience segments that can become part of the brand's sort of organic audience portfolio. I think that's such a neat thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, a couple examples, like you come in, this client's been doing this for years. They've been successful to a point, you know, maybe not where they want to be. That's why they're bringing us in to help. And they do get like pipe vision in a sense. But coming in and taking that step back and being like, all right, here's our process to test these audiences. It always ends up working with, you know, one of the angles we test to a sense. It uncovers tons of business opportunities for them just beyond the feedback we're getting, right? Like, I mean, look at the cost per clicks you're getting from people interested in this. You know, this is a value of your product you might not have even known existed, but you're getting thousands of people buying it. And so for an example, like we had a client open a club, like a product club for their specific product, and they're getting like hundreds of organic searches a day of people just wanting to join that club now because we pushed that, you know, through Facebook. It was an idea we came to them with, and now they're starting to see like that pushback where we could probably pause those campaigns soon, and it would just kind of be something in the background that, you know, generates, you know, revenue for them.
Very cool.
It all compounds, you know, each platform you're on, you'll start to see your YouTube video views just organically increase, and your Facebook presence, all that shows, you know, Google organic search loves, you know, YouTube profiles and things like that. And if you can have that first page, just, you know, your whole company, you're set.
Nice
strategy. Yeah.
Very cool. And Taylor, I just want to give you a chance to talk, like, you know, you're seasoned beyond your years, I feel like, in terms of a media buyer. I feel like you've just, you know, you've really taken to this. I wanted to know, did you have any stories of like big wins that you've had with specific clients that sort of like stand out to you as something you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, for me, I think the project management workflows and how that's related to performance, that's probably been the biggest takeaway for me throughout my experience. So getting to work with our creative and our design teams and apply the data, apply the analysis, apply all of our combined experience, working on different projects with different years of experience there too, and seeing what we can do to really take it to that next level, and solve some of the micro problems within like funnels, as well as capitalize on the wins within funnels and just take it that much further. So that's like building those workflows, getting to work with the team, and then seeing the result at the end of it has definitely been the big win for me.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for coming on the show today. Anyone have any exciting weekend plans?
Oh, just getting outside and enjoying the sun. It's really hot right now, so nice. Yeah,
it's gorgeous. What are you building this weekend, Kyle?
Yeah, exactly. I'm finishing up a bench for my backyard. I'm gonna do a little oasis back there. I'm gonna get a propane fire and start drinking because it's sunny.
That's lovely. How about you, Taylor? You got anything planned this weekend?
Similar to Jacob, I'm gonna be trying to get out there and enjoy the outdoors a bit.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks again, guys. And we will see you again soon in the office one of these days for a foosball game.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric.
Cheers. Thank you,
Thanks,
guys. Bye.